Let's start with the prayers first. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Om Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Vasudevaya.
You can recite the following prayers together. Narayanam Namaskritya Naram Chaiva Narottamam Devim Saraswatim Vyasam Tato Jayam Udirayet. Shrinvatam Swakatah Krishnaha Punya Shravan Kirtanaha Hridhi Antahastho hi Abhadrani Vidhunoti Surat Satam Nashta Prayeshu Abhadreshu Nityam Bhagvat Sevaya Bhagvati Uttama Shloke Bhaktir Bhavati Naishti. Om Jnana-Timirandasya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurue Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Sthapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Dadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Uta Padakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagradatam Sahagana Raghunathanvitam Tam Sajivam Advaitam Savadhutam Paridana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakhanvitamscha हे कृष्ण करुणा सिंधु दीन बंधु जगतपते गोपेश गोपिका कांता राधा कांता नमोस्तुते तप्त कांचन गौरांगी श्री राधे वृंदावनेश्वरी कृष्ण भानु सुत देवे प्रणमामि हरिप्रिये वाञ्छाकल्पतरुभ्यश्च कृपा सिंधुभ्य एव च पतितानां पावनेभ्यो वैष्णवेभ्यो नमो नमः। जय श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर श्रीवासादि गौर भक्तवृंदा हरे कृष्णा 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे हरे. Okay, so we'll be discussing from Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 9, Chapter 15, verse number 16. I hope everyone is able to see my screen. So, yeah. Okay, so you can all repeat after me. Shri Rajo Vacha Kim Tad Amho Bhagavato
Kim tad ahmo bhagavato
Rajanyer Ajitatmabhi
Rajanyer ajitatmabhi
Kritam Yena Kulam Nashtam
Kritam yena kulam nashtam
Kshatriyanam Abhikshanashaha
Kshatriyanam avikshanasaha.
Shri Rajo Vacha
Shri Rajuvacho
Kim Tad Amho Bhagavato
Kim tad ahmo bhagavato
Rajanyer Ajitatmabhi
Rajanyer ajitatmabhi
Kritam Yena Kulam Nashtam
Kritam yena kulam nashtam
Kshatriyanam Abhikshanshaha
Kshatriyanam avikshanaha.
Shri Rajo Vacha
Shri Rajuvacha
Kim Tad Amho Bhagavato
Kim tad ahum bhagavato
Rajanyer Ajitatmabhi
Rajanyer ajitatmabhi
Kritam Yena Kulam Nashtam
Kritam yena kulam nashtam
Kshatriyanam Abhikshanashaha.
Kshatriyanam abhikshanasaha.
Anyone would like to recite the verse?
Shri Rajuvacha
Shri Rajo Vacha
Kim Tat Amho Bhagavato
Kim Tad Amho Bhagavato
Rajanyer Ajitatmabhi
Rajanyer Ajitatmabhi
Kritam Yena Kulam Nashtam
Kritam Yena Kulam Nashtam
Kshatriyanam Abhikshashanaha.
Kshatriyanam Abhikshanashaha. Anyone else?
Shri Rajo
Shri Rajo Vacha
Kim tadamho bhagavato
किं तदमहो भगवतो
राजन्यरजितात्मभिः
राजन्यैरजितात्मभिः
कुलं नष्टं
कृतं येन कुलं नष्टं
क्षत्रियाणाम् अभिक्ष्णशः
क्षत्रियाणाम् अभिशंसः।
श्रीराजोवाच
श्रीराजोवाच
किं तदमो भगवतो
किं तदमहो भगवतो
राजन्यैरजितात्मभिः
राजन्यैरजितात्मभिः
कृतं येन कुलं नष्टं
कृतं येन कुलं नष्टं
क्षत्रियाणाम् अभिक्ष्णशः।
क्षत्रियाणाम् अभिशंसः।
श्रीराजोवाच
श्रीराजोवाच
तदम् अह्नो भगवतो
किं तदमहो भगवतो
राज राजन्यैर् अजितात्मभिः
राजन्यैरजितात्मभिः
तं येन कुलं नष्टं
कृतं येन कुलं नष्टं
क्षत्रियाणामभिक्ष्णतः।
क्षत्रियाणाम् अभिशंसः. Okay, so let's recite the synonyms. Shri Rajo Vacha.
Shri Rajovacha.
Maharaj Parikshit inquired.
Maharaj Parikshit inquired.
Kim.
Kim.
What?
What?
Tat Amaha.
Tat amaha.
That offense.
That offense.
Bhagavataha.
Bhagavata.
Unto the Supreme Personality of Godhead.
Unto the Supreme Personality of God.
Rajanye hai.
Rajanya.
By the royal family.
By the right league.
Ajitatma bhihi.
Adhidatma.
Who could not control their senses and thus were degraded.
Who could not control their senses and thus were degraded.
Kritam.
Kritam.
Which had been done.
Which had been done.
Yena.
Yena.
By which.
By which.
Kulam.
Kulam.
The dynasty.
The dynasty.
Nashtam.
Nashtam.
Was annihilated.
Was annihilated.
Kshatriyanam.
Kshatriyanam.
Of the royal family.
Of the royal family.
Abhikshanishaha.
Abhikshanishaha.
Again and again.
Again and again.
Translation by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. King Parikshit inquired from Sukdev Goswami, what was the offense that the Kshatriyas who could not control their senses committed before Lord Parshuram, the incarnation of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, for which the Lord annihilated the Kshatriya dynasty again and again. Srimati Bhaktivedanta Swami ki namane Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Deshatarine. So I'll read the translation one more time. King Parikshit inquired from Sukdev Goswami, what was the offense that the Kshatriyas who could not control their senses committed before Lord Parshuram, the incarnation of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, for which the Lord annihilated the Kshatriya dynasty again and again. So we all know that Lord Parshuram actually had annihilated the Kshatriya dynasty 21 times, and he was not actually famous but infamous for that. And so here King Parikshit is inquiring from Sukadev Goswami that what was the reason, why did the Kshatriyas what did the Kshatriyas do to offend Lord Parshuram, because of which he had to exterminate the Kshatriya dynasty 21 times. So today is a very auspicious day. It is the appearance day of Lord Parshuram. Lord Parshuram is one of the Dasha Avtaras. He's prominently known as one of the Dasha Avtaras. Actually, I'll just stop the share so that everyone can see me.
Yeah, I did, Prabhu.
You did? Okay. Thank you, Prabhu. So Parshuram, actually, if we look at the Dashavtaras, he is the 6th Avtara within the Dashavtaras. So before Parshuram comes, anyone would like to mention who comes before Parshuram in the sequence of Dashavtaras?
Vaman.
Yes, it's Vaman Dev. And after Parshuram comes Lord Ram. So fifth is Vamandev, sixth is Parshuram, and seventh is Lord Ram. So actually, the concept of Dashavatara is mentioned in the Garud Purana. Now, in the Srimad Bhagavatam, all the 10 incarnations are mentioned, but they are not mentioned emphatically. So, these 10 incarnations have been, Jayadev Goswami, who is one of the very famous Vaishnava Acharya who appeared before Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, he wrote a book that in today's language became the devotional bestseller. That book is very famous. Even Chaitanya Mahaprabhu had actually relished that. That is known as Gita Govinda. So Gita Govinda actually consists of very intimate pastimes of Radha and Krishna. So to caution people that these are not mundane pastimes, he prefaces Gita Govinda with the Dashavatara Stotram. So if we look at these personalities, these are very diverse personalities in one sense. If we look at the personality of Krishna and then compare it with Parshuram, if we did not know that these two are are coming at the same person, we would think they're two completely diverse personalities. But he explains in the Dashavatara Sutra that the same Govinda who is sporting in the groves of Vrindavan, he is actually Vaman, he is actually Ram, he is actually Matsya, he is actually Kurma. So he gives the Dashavatara Sutra over there. And since then, these 10 incarnations have been considered like very prominent and very important incarnations of the Lord. So in our Gaudiya Vaishnava tradition, initially Srila Rupa Goswami and after that Jiva Goswami had very analytically and systematically talked about the different avatars. So Rupa Goswami wrote a book which is the Laghu Bhagavatamrit. We have this book available in our store also. So this book is actually a book of avatar science. What are the different characteristics of the different avatars and how the different avatars fall into different categories? And he discusses that very elaborately. Now, technically speaking, the word, we generally translate avatar as incarnation. Actually, Prabhupada uses that translation. But technically speaking, incarnation is not a very accurate translation for avatar, because the word incarnation has the seed karana. Karana, as it comes in carnivorous, means flesh. So actually incarnation is a Christian concept, because Lord Jesus came to this world and he had a material body like all of us, but still the Christians considered him as divine. Their idea was that the divinity of God is manifested in the humanity of Jesus. So that is and that is expressed through the concept of incarnation. So now Prabhupada had to do like a complex task. He had to present a complex philosophy that was quite unfamiliar to the Western audiences. So actually words are like handles to concepts. Concepts are in our mind and we catch hold of those concepts through words. So rather than using unfamiliar words for unfamiliar concepts, because the concept of avatar has no parallels in any of the other religious traditions of the world. In other religious traditions, there's a concept of son of God or messenger of God or revealed word of God. But the concept of God descending himself in his full glory and revealing his pastimes for all of the world to behold and relish, not just for that time but for all of eternity, that is a unique revelation of Vedic tradition to the world theology. Of course, that is not something to be proud or arrogant of. It is a matter of great responsibility for us. Srila Prabhupada would say, if a person is truly interested in God, wherever knowledge about God is available, he take that knowledge and increase his devotion towards God. Sometimes some Christian priests would come and challenge Srila Prabhupada that if Jesus talked about the same God that is talked about in the Vedic literature, why did he not talk about Krishna specifically? So Prabhupada gave different answers at different times. But what Prabhupada said is, you have to ask yourself, are you interested in God or are you interested in religion? Are you interested in religion or are you interested in God? Because if you're truly interested in God, wherever knowledge about God is available, we take that knowledge and we increase our devotion to God. Different religions are like different universities, and universities are meant to give us knowledge about God. So if a student is say is a graduate from MIT, and now he wants to do some PhD, and that PhD course is available in Harvard University, he won't say that, no, I am a MIT graduate, if I won't go to Harvard. He's not interested in university. He's interested in the knowledge. University is important, not to be neglected, but what is more important is the knowledge about God. So we, as Gaudiya Vaishnava, we basically focus mostly on Krishna and Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. But we also would like to enhance our knowledge in every possible way and our attraction to Krishna in every possible way. Srila Rupa Goswami gives a principle in Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, which he quotes from Padma Puran. He says, "Yena kena prakaren mana Krishna niveshayet." By some way or the other, I want to increase my devotion towards Krishna. I want to fix my mind on Krishna. So in that sense, the Vedic literature are quite non-sectarian in their message. Now we were talking about the word avatara. So the Vedic concept of avatar is, avatiriti iti avatar. One who descends is an avatar. So these personalities, they eternally exist in the spiritual sky. It's not that Krishna had no existence before he came to this world. Sometimes people ask this question: were there Krishna temples before 5,000 years ago when Krishna came? Before he came, was Krishna worshipped before he came to this world? No, we have to understand that Krishna is not a historical personality. Krishna is not a mythological personality. He is the supreme personality. He exists beyond the realm of time, and he reveals himself through the medium of history and gives us a glimpse, glimpse of his pastimes, so that we can become attracted to Krishna. So now if we talk about these Dasha Avtaras, these Dasha Avtaras are like very prominent avtaras of the Lord. And in the Srimad Bhagavatam, we see that all these avtaras, the different avtaras are mentioned progressively. So Bhagavatam's actually, in the Srimad Bhagavatam, Krishna's pastimes are described in the 10th canto. So what Bhagavatam does is that it progressively goes over various incarnations, over various avatars. Of course, Bhagavatam starts with the pastimes of Krishna in the first canto, in the 7th chapter, when Krishna appears as the charioteer of Arjuna. But the focus on Krishna comes in the 10th canto. So what Srimad Bhagavatam does is, it progressively goes over the various incarnations of the Lord, and then it brings us to the culmination in the 10th canto, where it reveals that all these incarnations that we have discussed so far, all these incarnations have come from this person, Krishna. Because it is very easy to confuse Krishna with just another person. Krishna looks so human, he appears so human, he has so humanly, his relationships, is the way he puts himself forward. He appears very, very human, but actually Bhagavatam describes that Krishna is not just a human. He is actually divine, and not just divine. He is a supreme divinity. So actually, whatever is happening in the Srimad Bhagavatam, Sukadeva Goswami is like a spiritual historian. So he, in one sense, he is describing his own autobiography thematically in the Srimad Bhagavatam, not chronologically. Thematically means that Bhagavatam describes that actually Sukadeva Goswami was actually, initially he was attracted to the impersonal Brahman, and later he became attracted to the personal Bhagwan, to Bhagwan. So he is revealing in the Srimad Bhagavatam that how the Bhagwan is so so captivating, so he talks about the various incarnations over there. And just before he talks about Krishna in the 10th canto, he talks about Lord Parshuram over here in the 9th canto. So chapters 15th and 16th of the 9th canto are the pastimes of Lord Parshuram. So actually, we were talking about the Laghu Bhagavatamrit. So in the Laghu Bhagavatamrit, Rupa Goswami describes that actually there are 6 different kinds of avatars. So the 6 different kinds of avatars are the Leela avatars. So Leela avatars are those avatars who come to perform various Leelas, you know. So for example, Lord Krishna, so these avatars come only for the sake of performing Leelas. So for example, Lord Krishna is a Leela avatar, you know, Lord Ram is a Leela avatar. Now some people say that Krishna is actually Yuga avatar for Dwapar Yuga. But actually Krishna is not the Yuga avatar, you know, he comes right at the end of the Yuga, of the Dwapar Yuga, you know. If he would have been a Yuga avatar, he should have come at the start of the Dwapar Yuga. Now, what's the use of, you know, coming at the end of Dwapar Yuga and giving the, you know, the Yuga Dharma for that, because the Yuga is anyway coming to an end. So Krishna is a Leela avatar. Lord Ram is also a Leela avatar. So that is the first category of avatars. Then the second category, as we said, is the Yuga avatar. Now, Yuga avatars are those personalities who come to teach the specific spiritual practices for that age. So, for example, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is both a Leela avatar and a Yuga avatar. So, further, the third category is the Purusha avatars. So, these avatars are the sources and sustainers of the universe. So, many people talk about Vishnu. So, Srimad Bhagavatam tells us that not just one, there are 3 Vishnus who are manifested in this world. So, these 3 Vishnus are known as the Purusha avatars. Then the fourth category is the Guna avatars. So Guna avatars are Brahma, Vishnu and Mahesh. So these 3 are actually taking care of the 3 different gunas. Then comes the Manvantara avatars. So Manvantara avatars are those personalities who appear in every Manvantara and they take care of law and order. And lastly, the 6th category is the Shaktyavesh avatar. Now the Shaktyavesh avatar are actually of 2 types. One is Sakshat and the other is Avesh. So Sakshat is when Krishna himself comes and performs a specific task. That is the Sakshat avatar within the Shaktyavesh category. And Avesh means, Avesh means, you know, when Krishna endows a particular potency on a particular personality, that is the Avesh avatar within the Shaktyavesh category. So actually the scriptures describe, so now here's a question for everyone. We are talking about Lord Parshuram. Anyone would like to answer, you know, in which category Lord Parshuram falls in the 6 avatars?
Saktyavesh.
Yeah, within Shaktyavesh, there are 2 different categories. Sakshat and Avesh. So which one is Parshuram?
Avesh.
Yes. Yeah. So actually, Rupa Goswami describes that Lord Parshuram is both a Shaktyavesh. So within Shaktyavesh is the Avesh avatar, but he is both Shaktyavesh and a Leela avatar because he also performs Leelas. So now there are 2 other avatars within the Dasha avatars who falls under the same category. Anyone would like to mention who are those, the other 2 Dasha avatars who fall in the same category as Parshuram?
Lord Buddha.
Yes, Lord Buddha is one. And the second?
I'm going to let somebody else answer.
Kalki.
Narsingha avatar.
Narsingha avatar is a Leela avatar. He is directly the supreme personality of Godhead.
Kalki.
Actually, it's the other one is Vyas Dev. I am not very sure about Kalki, so we can look it up what Rupa Goswami says about Kalki avatar. But yeah, that is possible that even Kalki avatar is also a Shaktyavesh avatar. Okay, so now we know that Lord Parshuram is the is the Shaktyavesh avatar. He's the Avesh avatar in the Shaktyavesh category. So again, I'll quickly mention the 6 categories. We have Leela avatars, Yuga avatars, Purusha avatars, Guna avatars, Manvantara avatars, and Shaktyavesh avatars. And within Shaktyavesh avatar, we have Sakshat and Avesh. So before we get inside the actual pastime of Lord Parshuram, which are described in the 15th and 16th chapter of the 9th canto, I want to quickly pause here and see if anyone has any comments or any questions about what I have mentioned. Just one quick comment or question.
Krishna Prabhu.
Yes, Prabhu.
So, in the scripture, many times we read that terms like incarnation, expansions, right?
Yes.
So what is the difference actually?
Okay, so actually, so there are two terms. One is descent. Descent is explained as avatar, and one is expansion. So expansion is when Krishna is expanding himself on the same realm. So so for example, we see Krishna when he is performing the Ras Leela. So he expands himself, in different personalities, and then he is there with all the gopis. So those are called as expansions. And incarnations is when the Lord is descending from the spiritual realm to the material realm. Those are known as avatars or incarnations. So when he is on the same realm, when he is expanding himself, those are known as expansions. And when he is descending from the spiritual realm to the material realm, that is called as incarnation or avatar.
So Balaram is expansion.
But yeah, he's actually both an expansion and an avatar. Because if we see, he exists in the spiritual world also, and he's the expansion of Lord Krishna. So that same expansion that exists in the spiritual world, that also comes as an avatar. So he's both. He's also one of the Dashavatas that are mentioned. So he's both an expansion and he's in a very special category actually. So when we talk about Lord Ram is not an expansion. He is an avatar. So similarly, Lord Narsimha is an avatar. He's not an expansion. So.
Thank you, Prabhu.
Okay, so let's talk about Lord Parshuram's pastimes that are mentioned in the Srimad Bhagavatam. So as we know, Lord Parshuram was born as a Brahmin, but he acted as a Kshatriya. So actually, it's very unusual characteristics. So what our scriptures does is whenever there's a personality that is highlighted, and if the personality has some unusual characteristics, then the scriptures go back and trace either in the past life of that personality or in the ancestry of that personality to trace the reason. What is the reason for this unusual characteristic? So Bhagavatam starts with the pastimes of the narration of Lord Parshuram starts with the life of the grandfather of Lord Parshuram. So his grandfather is a sage named Richik Rishi, and he gets married to a princess whose name was Satyavati. So Satyavati is the daughter of King Gadhi, and she gets married to Richik Rishi. So obviously she was born to a Kshatriya father, but then she is married to a Brahmana. So after the marriage, the Richik Rishi's mother-in-law, she requests Richik Rishi to perform a sacrifice by which both Satyavati and her mother can get sons. So Richik Rishi, obliges her request, and he arranges for a sacrifice. And what he does is, so he arranges for two different kinds of prasad. One is to be eaten by his mother-in-law, and one is to be eaten by his wife Satyavati. So after giving the prasad to to his wife and her mother, he goes to take a bath. So when he's gone away, so now Satyavati's mother thinks that because naturally the husband loves his wife, so he would have arranged for a more stronger son for his own wife. So she tells her daughter that you exchange your offering with me. You take my prasad and let me take your prasad. Now Satyavati was in Dharma Sankat, but because her mother was elder to her, she accepted the instruction. So they both exchanged the offering, and then the mother said that we have to do it before Richik Rishi returns. So they both exchanged their offerings and then they ate it. So when Richik Rishi returned, so he immediately understood what had happened. So he said, now you have done something terrible. Actually, I have arranged the yajna in such a way that because you are married to a Brahman, you will have a Brahmana son. And because your mother is married to a Kshatriya, she will have a Kshatriya son. But now because you have interchanged the offerings, you will get a Kshatriya son and your mother will get a Brahman son. So Satyavati became a little perturbed, and then she beseeched to the Rishi that I didn't want to do it and I was forced to do it. So please take it back. So actually, Richik Rishi said that I cannot take away the consequences of what had happened, but I can delay it for you. So your son will not be a Kshatriya, but your son's son will be a Kshatriya. And Satyavati was relieved. You know, if you cannot solve the problem, at least postpone the problem. So actually, the queen's son later on went on to become the great sage Vishwamitra. So, and that is also talked about in the 16th chapter of Srimad Bhagavatam in the 9th canto. And Satyavati's son was the very powerful sage named Jamadagni. So Jamadagni, as we all know, had many sons later on, and the youngest of his son was Lord Parshuram. So Jamadagni Rishi would see that actually right from his childhood, you know, Parshuram had, you know, very tremendous attraction for weapons. And he was surprised because generally Brahmanas are not so much attracted to weapons. And even without practice, he would be so efficient at weapons. So Jamadagni Rishi would tell him that, you know, you are a Brahmin, you should act like a Brahmin. So Parshuram was an obedient son. So he would listen to his father. But Krishna also says in the Bhagavad Gita, Nigraha kim karishyati, you know, that which is one's nature, that he cannot resist. So of course, when the Lord himself is coming, we understand that everything there is transcendental. But even if it is transcendental, we can actually draw lessons for our own edification. So Madhvacharya in his writings write that there are the pastimes that are described in the Puranas and in the Itihasas. Itihasas are Mahabharata and Ramayana. So those pastimes can be understood at three different levels. So the first level, he says, is just the literal level. You know, just by hearing the pastimes, we get purified. And many times, Srila Prabhupada would give lectures in Hindi in India, and his Western disciples would, when Prabhupada would start giving the lecture, they would start going away. So Prabhupada would see, where are you going? You know, just sit and hear. So they would say, no, we can't understand anything. So Prabhupada would say, even if you don't understand, just hear the sound vibration, you will be purified. Of course, that is not the only way of listening to the scriptures. Scripture is also meant for, you know, for understanding. But the point is that just by hearing the sound vibration, we get purified. In the Valmiki Ramayana, Valmiki says, Charitam Raghunathasya Shatakoti Pravishyaram Ek Aksharam Pumsam Mahapatakanashanam. You know, the character of Lord Ram is so sublime that just one letter, you know, it's capable of destroying immense sins, you know, Mahapatakanashanam. So just by hearing, we can get purified. The second level he describes is the ethical level, you know, where we, you know, hear a pastime and then we learn from that. You know, so in one sense, Srila Prabhupada does that regularly in his purport. You know, in the first chapter of Bhagavad Gita, he says that, you know, Arjuna is weak-minded. He's getting overcome by, you know, by anxiety and, you know, emotions, and he's reluctant to fight. And then later on, he will say, no, Arjuna is actually very compassionate and soft-hearted. And this soft-heartedness is actually a symptom of a person who is capable of being enlightened. So, and we would think, you know, what exactly is Arjuna actually weak-minded, or is he soft-hearted? So actually, these personalities who are associates of Lord, they're beyond our judgment, but still we can draw moral lessons from their personality. Madhusudan Chakravarti, who is a great commentator on Bhagavad Gita, and Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur quotes him in his Sarartha Darshini. So he writes that the whole purpose of the first chapter of Bhagavad Gita is to establish the qualification of a person who is capable of being enlightened. So, and Prabhupada does that regularly. He points out every place in the first chapter where, you know, the different different characteristics shown by Arjuna. So his soft-heartedness, his you know, long-term vision, you know, to be able to see what would be the long-term consequences of his action and then decide immediate action. Those are certain things which you know, which basically demonstrates the capability of a person of being enlightened. At the third level that Madhvacharya talks about, and which our acharyas use very rarely, is the metaphorical level. So metaphorical means, you know, what is the symbolism in a particular pastime. So for example, Bhaktivinoda Thakur in Chaitanya Shikshamrit, he says that, and even Krishna Samhita, he says that actually the you know, the different demons who Krishna had killed, they actually represent different anarthas in our heart. And when we hear about the pastimes where Krishna is killing those demons, those anarthas get destroyed from our heart. No, but Prabhupada would caution us that the metaphorical explanation is never at the expense of the literal explanation. There are certain commentators on the Bhagavad Gita in India who had, they were a little embarrassed. Why would God scriptures like Bhagavad Gita talk about violence? It should not talk about violence. So because they could not understand the whole context behind the violence, and because of their inability to connect with any sampradaya acharyas, they try to explain the violence as metaphorical. So there are different even freedom fighters who have written commentaries on Bhagavad Gita, and they have explained the violence there. It's not actually happened. It is all made up. It's basically like a metaphor. Like they explain that the Kauravas are like our lower desires, and Pandavas are our higher desires. So there is a fight between the lower desires and the higher desires, and then ultimately the higher desires would win over the lower desires. Something like that they have explained. So Prabhupada would caution us that the metaphorical explanation is never at the expense of the literal explanation. So anyway, we are talking about the pastime of Parshuram.
Hare Krishna Prabhuji. Can you repeat it? The last sentence you said Prabhupada cautioned about.
The metaphorical explanation is never at the expense of the literal explanation.
Exactly, that's what I think. And sometimes people feel pride about explaining metaphorical explanation, and that gives, like you said, impersonal touch.
Yeah, that's right.
That these histories, the incident never happened, something like that.
Exactly. Yeah, there are many pastimes even in Puranas that they just write it off as metaphorical explanations, not literal.
So we have to be very careful. We should never talk before any new people, or even people like us, because sometimes even our friends said, "Hey, why you are going there?" Something like that.
Right.
So then we remember that Prabhupada warned, not to associate with the worldly people, because if we have not enough experience, they can drag us in their area.
Yep,
Yeah.
that's right.
Thank you, Prabhuji.
Thank you. So now we are talking about Lord Parshuram. So actually, when a particular personality is highlighted in the scriptures, and when his glories have to be established, so his opponent, his glories will be told. So, and when his glories, when his glories are being told, so actually there is the king of the world at that time was like a very powerful Kshatriya, and unfortunately he was very arrogant. His name was Kartivira Arjuna or Sahasrabahu Arjuna. So actually he has pleased Lord Dattatreya, and from Dattatreya he had got a benediction of having 1,000 arms, 1,000 arms. So he was a very, very powerful personality. And when his glories are told, it is said that once he was actually camping with his associates near a river, and just playfully what he did is, with his 1,000 arms, he blocked the flow of the river. And when he blocked the flow of the river, I believe the river name that is mentioned in Bhagavatam is Narmada River. But when he blocked the flow of the river, somewhere upstream, Ravana was camping with his associates. So what happened is, suddenly the river flooded over there. So when the river flooded, Ravana was very annoyed. So he couldn't tolerate that. So he went ahead and he challenged Kartivira Arjuna. So now we all know that actually Ravana is extremely powerful. Nobody, not even the Devatas, could stand in front of Ravana. But when he challenged Kartivira Arjuna, so Bhagavatam describes that actually Kartivira Arjuna just nonchalantly defeated Ravana, caught him and bound him up like a monkey, like an animal. And then he took him along with him to his capital Mahishmati. And then he kept him imprisoned like an animal. So later on, the sage father of Ravana, his name was Vishrava. Vishrava, he had to go and beseech to the king, and he begged, please release my son. So Bhagavatam describes that he neglectfully, just like a person would release an animal, he neglectfully released Ravana. So now, interestingly, now when the Ramayana is talking about the glory of Lord Ram, and when he's talking about Ravan and how powerful it was, it doesn't talk about this pastime, because every scripture has a specific narrative. It just focuses on that narrative. But we as devotees, we know that, and we can talk about these different places where we can talk and tell people that actually Ravana was not that powerful. He was defeated by Kartivira Arjuna. So the nature of arrogance that this Kartivira Arjuna had is that, I am the best, and I deserve the best of everything. So he would go around and he would make sure that everyone submits to his authority. So it is described that once he was he along with his full army and his sons, he had, I believe it is mentioned, he has 10,000 sons. So he was passing through a forest, and there he saw the hermitage of Jamadagni Rishi. So he came to the hermitage of Jamadagni Rishi, and Jamadagni Rishi was a great Rishi, and he saw that the king of world has come. So he wanted to honor the king. So he had a Kamdhenu cow, and through the cow he arranged for an abandoned feast for the king and his the whole army. So when what this Kartivira Arjuna did, instead of being expressing gratitude to the sage, he thought that this cow is actually better than most of the cows, not just most of the cows, the all other cows that I have. So he said that actually I should have this cow. So he didn't even bother to ask permission of sage Jamadagni. He just told his soldiers that get this cow, we'll take it with us. And then without even saying anything, he just started taking the cow away, and he took the cow away. Now the Brahmanas also had a lot of power. It's not that Brahmanas can, you can treat the Brahmanas the way you want. So if we see in the Swayamvar of Draupadi, when the Pandavas came in the garb of Brahmins, and then when all the other Kshatriyas failed to hit the target, and Arjuna hit the target. So first he actually asked the king Drupad that, are the Brahmanas allowed to compete in the Swayamvar? So Drupad said that, yeah, Brahmanas are always more respectful for the Kshatriyas. So respectable for the Kshatriyas. So yeah, you can compete. So Arjuna actually shot, and then he actually hit the target. So actually when he won the hand of Draupadi, all the other Kshatriyas were incensed, because they thought that I am coming here to to glorify myself, and even if I don't win the hand of Draupadi, someone from my own group should win the hand. So we see that the idea of extended false ego. Duryodhana wanted to kill the Pandavas, but when Ashwatthama went ahead and killed the sons of Pandavas, he thought that, oh, my dynasty have been killed. So how the extended false ego will delude us, that is quite peculiar. So when the Kshatriyas, they became incensed, and then they thought, this king Drupad had insulted us. So they attacked on Drupad. So at that time, Yudhishthira Maharaj told the other Pandavas that, now this King Drupad is our relative, he's our father-in-law, and we should protect him. So we should fight. So actually, at that time, Bhima started going, and then he wanted to, uproot a shal tree. So Yudhishthira Maharaj hold his shoulder and then said that, no, don't do that. If you do that, everybody would know that you are Bhima, because no one other than Bhima could do it. So he said, just use an ordinary weapon. And then actually Arjuna, he went ahead with his bow. So the same bow that he had used to hit the target. And then from the Kshatriya side, Karna had come to fight with Arjuna. So at first, Karna was fighting, very reluctantly, very casually. He was shooting arrows very casually. But this Arjuna, who was under the garb of Brahmin, he counted all the arrows of Karna and then started wounding Karna. And then Karna actually started using more stronger weapons, and all his weapons were counted. So at that time, Karna asked, who are you? This such dexterity in weapons cannot be seen. And then he names a few personalities: Indra, Drona, Bhishma. Tell me who you are. So Arjuna at that time continues his garb and says that, no, I am just a Brahmin, and by the mercy of my Guru Maharaj, I have learned Dhanurvidya, the art of archery. So at that time, when Karna hears that, he lowers his bow, and then he says that, oh, the martial prowess, the Brahma Tej, the spiritual prowess of the Brahmanas is always greater than the martial power of the Kshatriyas. So the point we are making is that actually Brahmanas have power, and it is accepted even by Kshatriyas when they are in good sense. So now, but the Kartivara Arjuna did not think that Brahmanas would have any power, and then he took the cow away. And Jamadagni Rishi was thinking that I should not be using my Brahmanical powers against the king. So actually Brahmins, they would use their powers only in the times of emergencies. So we see in the 4th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, there is this king Vena who was extremely sinful, and then he crossed all limits. The Brahmanas, not even by any weapon, they just use some hum, the sound of some sound vibration, and this king was destroyed. So that is the power of Brahmins. So when the Kartivara Arjuna, he took the cow away, at that time Parshuram was not there. So when Parshuram came back to the ashram, and then when he heard what had happened, so now he just blazed like fire. The Kshatriyas, they have an itch to fight, but there is no scope to satisfy that itch. But now he had all the reasons to go and fight. So it is described that actually Parshuram, he, without even informing anyone, he just blazed like fire and charged on the kingdom of Kartivara Arjuna, Mahishmati. So when Kartivara Arjuna, he was just reaching Mahishmati back with his army after taking the cow, and then he suddenly saw this fierce-looking personalities coming and trying to attack. So he immediately, instead of fighting himself, he ordered his army to attack Parshuram. So it is described that in the Mahabharata, both the Pandavas and the Kauravas combined, they have 18 Akshohani, the army. Against Parshuram, Kartivara Arjuna had 17 Akshohini, and Parshuram single-handedly starting fighting and killing everyone. So Bhagavatam describes that Parshuram was fighting at the speed of mind, but when he got tired, he was fighting at the speed of wind. So that was his speed, and he single-handedly killed every single person in the army. And when Kartivara Arjuna saw that his whole army has been annihilated, he was enraged, he was incensed, and then he came forward to fight with his 1,000 arms. So he was holding 500 bows in his 500 arms, and with the other 500 arms, he was shooting arrows simultaneously on Parshuram. And Parshuram was able to counter all the arrows. And then what Parshuram did is, before killing Kartivara Arjuna, he wanted to destroy his pride first. So he first cut off all the arms of Kartivara Arjuna, reduced him to helplessness, and then killed him. And then after killing him, he brought the cow back to his father's ashram. So, and then he told his father what had happened. So this is a time when the character of Jamadagni Muni is highlighted in a glorious way. So he tells Parshuram that actually, you shouldn't have done this. He says actually that the ornament of a Brahman is the quality of forgiveness. The Brahman is actually considered glorious even by Brahmaji, the original Brahman, because he always forgives. And because you have not forgiven, you have taken revenge. Now our whole dynasty is contaminated by sin. So therefore you should go and you should do atonement for your sins. So you should go to various different holy places and take a bath. Now, so actually Parshuram is himself the Lord, but he is also acting for our edification, for teaching us. So he immediately agrees, and then he leaves for atonement. But later on, so they will see that this forgiveness is actually a very elusive concept. Is forgiveness really practical? So generally, what the problem comes is, when we equate forgiveness with trust. These two are two different things. So we see in the Mahabharata that so what scriptures tells us that it is good to forgive. So we understand it is good to forgive, but it does not mean that we should trust the person who has done something wrong. So in the Mahabharata we see that when Vibhishan, he was giving good advice to Dhritarashtra all the time. So when the Pandavas were banished to the forest, at that time, later on, it is described that Dhritarashtra conscious awakens, and then he calls Vidura. Vidura, please tell me how should I, how should I redeem myself? I have not done something right, so please guide me. So at that time, Vidura says that right when Duryodhana was born, I told you to abandon this son, because normal children, when they're born, they cry. But Duryodhana was not crying, he was braying like a donkey. And he said, I told you it's very inauspicious and you should have abandoned that son. And even if you would have abandoned that son, you would still have 99 other sons. But now that one son had spoiled all other 99 sons. So actually, so when Dhritarashtra hears this, he becomes really angry. He says, you're always partial to the Pandavas. I don't want to see your face. You can go wherever you want. Just get out of here. So at that time, Vidura leaves and he goes immediately to the forest, to the Pandavas. But the next morning, when Dhritarashtra wakes up, then he thinks that, no, what did I do? Vidura was such a nice, he would give me good advice. So he sends Sanjay back, and then he asks Sanjay to call Vidura back. So Vidura actually at that time comes back, and then Dhritarashtra asks for forgiveness. So, and Vidura was such a gentle person, he immediately forgives Dhritarashtra, but he never trusts Dhritarashtra. He always keeps a sharp eye. And before also, because he has kept a sharp eye, he knew that, this house of flag would be burned. So the point is that when we talk about forgiveness, so we can forgive, but we should not trust and allow a chance of reformation to the person, and then later on, if the person reforms, then we can forgive and forget. If we forgive and forget even at the beginning itself, then the forgetfulness would backfire on us. So we see even in the Krishna Lila in the 10th canto, this idea of forgiving but not forgetting. So when the Ashtam Garb of Devaki turns out to be Devi, at that time this Kamsa, he was very shocked. He was actually a worshipper of Lord Shiva, and then he thought that my God, this the consort of my Aradhya Dev, Lord Shiva, is coming out from the body of Devaki, and I tortured her body. So he actually at that time goes and asks for forgiveness from Vasudeva and Devaki. So Vasudeva actually forgives Kamsa, but he doesn't trust Kamsa. He doesn't tell him that, okay, no, my son is safe in Vrindavan. You actually, what came out was not my son. So he never trusts Kamsa. So basically what we are saying is we forgive, but we allow a chance of reformation to the person. If the person reforms, then we can forgive and forget. And if the person continues to deform, he does not reform, then punishment has to be administered. So, and we'll talk about why we are talking about this, but we see even in the Ramayana, when Lord Ram gives many chances to Ravana actually. So he sends Hanuman as the Shantidut, as the peace messenger, then he sends Angada as the peace messenger. And every time Ravana tried to arrest the peace messengers. And every time the attempt to arrest the emissaries backfired on him, and he lost, even his army was destroyed to a certain extent. So because Ravana continued to deform, then Lord Ram had to punish him. So we see all the different examples in the scriptures. So now we were at the point when, so what Jamdagni was telling to Parshuram was that, you as a Brahman shouldn't have punished. So in the scriptures, we see that there is the division of labor, according to the natural propensities of people. We have the 4 varnas, and these four varnas are not actually birth based, and our acharyas have repeatedly talked about it. These 4 varnas are actually the natural and efficient division of labor according to the natural propensities of the people. So we know that the material world is a place of misery, and there are a lot of problems in the material world. But still, we give, those problems to a person which a person likes to solve. For example, if you if you tell a Brahmin, then, just find this one verse in all the scriptures. So Brahmana would be happy to do that. But if you tell the same thing to a Vaishya, he would say, there are 2 million, 3 million verses. Where would I find one verse in the entire scriptures? Similarly, if you tell a Brahmin that we have to build a temple, so you go out and raise funds. So the Brahmin would say that, what is the need of building a temple? Just sit and chant Hare Krishna and everything will be good. So basically, this varnas are efficient division of labor according to the natural propensities of a person. So these are 4 essential human kinds. So Jamdagni said that you as a Brahmana should not have punished. So anyway, so when so later on, what happens is these the sons of Kartivara Arjuna, they actually wanted to take revenge. So actually, when Parshuram was attacking Kartivara Arjuna, at that time also the sons were there. But when they saw that this Parshuram is unstoppable, they did not had the Kshatriya spirit to fight, and then they fled from there at that time. But later on, once it is mentioned in the Bhagavatam that Parshuram was actually not there, he had gone some deep in the forest with his brothers, and at that time these sons of Kartivara Arjuna, they came very deviously from behind, and it is mentioned that actually Jamdagni Rishi was actually at that time sitting in the front of the fire and offering oblations, and they came most deviously from behind, brandishing their sword. And then his wife's name was Renuka. So Mother Renuka saw from a distance that what are they trying to do, and then she shouted, stop, and then but they did not stop, and then they just in a flash they they chopped off the head of Jamdagni. So and then they so Mother Renuka, she was like completely heartbroken, and then she started shouting, and she realized that only her powerful son Ram can help at that time. So she started shouting, Ram. So it is described that actually Parshuram was far away in the forest, but he immediately heard, and then he came running back. He rushed back to the scene. So interestingly, the same incident when happens in the Ramayana, when Lord Ram had gone towards to catch the deer, and then when Lakshmana also goes back behind Lord Ram, and then Sita calls for help. Lord Ram doesn't hear at that time. Why? Because he wanted to let the pastime develop over there. Depending on how what the rasa the Lord wants to relish, sometimes he would the Lord is omnipotent, but sometimes he would manifest his omnipotence, sometimes he would not. So but here it is described that Parshuram comes running back, and then when the sons of Kartivara Arjuna, they realize that in the rush of revenge they have done something brutal, and they just fled from there. So when Parshuram came, his mother was lamenting, beating her chest, and then Parshuram said to her mother that you bet your chest 21 times, I will exterminate 21 generations of these Haya kings. So he actually, at that time, he goes and starts attacking the sons of Kartivara Arjuna. But before that, Bhagavatam describes that how this Jamadagni is such a powerful rishi. How could he be killed like this by some Kshatriyas? It is described later on that Parshuram, after killing all the Kshatriyas, he performs a big fire sacrifice, a yagya, and through the credits of those yagya, he revives Jamdagni. And Jamdagni later on goes and becomes one of the Saptarishis. He's such a powerful sage. He's one of the Saptarishis. Then how could he be killed like that? So Bhagavatam describes a prior incident that had happened. So once Jamdagni was performing a fire sacrifice, and then he needed some water from the river, fresh water from the river. So he asked his wife Renuka to go get some water from the river. So when Renuka went there with to get the water, she saw in the river there was this Gandharva king Chitraratha sporting with the different apsaras in the river. So she was captivated looking at Chitraratha. Chitraratha is described as extremely beautiful. He's very handsome. And then she was momentarily attracted to Chitraratha. It did not last a moment, but she was basically captivated by the whole scene. And then later on, as she came back to her senses, she understood what's happening. So she realized that it's very late. So she took the water and then she rushed back towards her husband. But by the time she reached, the time for the yagya had passed. So we know that the Karmakandi yagyas, the timing is extremely important. So Jamdagni, by his mystical powers, he understood what had happened. So he was angry, first of all, that his fire sacrifice was almost disrupted, and secondly, he was angry because his wife was attracted to someone else. So he was so angry that he told his sons that your mother is unchaste, kill her. So now in the the Vedic tradition, to kill a woman is unthinkable. And what to say about a son killing his own mother? So the sons, they did not do anything. And then Jamdagni became more angry. And then he turned towards Parshuram. He said that your mother is unchaste and your brothers are, disloyal. Just kill all of them. So Parshuram at that time was thinking fast. Now he thought that now my father Jamdagni is so powerful. If he wants, he can kill himself. He is just checking my obedience. So what he does is he picks up his Parshu and then he kills all of them, his mother and his brothers. And this may sound a little ghastly, but we'll come back to what Prabhupada says about this. So when Parshuram kills them, Jamdagni is pleased with Parshuram. And then he says that, ask me some benediction, whatever you want. So at that time, Parshuram says that, please, grant their lives back, and then grant their lives, but wipe off their memories so that they don't know they shouldn't know that I killed them. So actually, Jamdagni at that time, he's very pleased, and then he brings them back to life. And then he wipes off their memories. So they just wake up as if they were sleeping, they were having a day sleep, and they came back. So they didn't understand what happened, but they were feeling very refreshed. So now Prabhupada actually says that this, the fault of Mother Renuka was very tiny. She was largely a very chaste woman and obedient wife. And to have someone killed for a tiny fault, it is actually completely disproportionate reaction. And because Jamdagni had given a completely disproportionate reaction, he himself got a disproportionate reaction. He had to be killed for that. So that is what Bhagavatam and Srila Prabhupada talks about this whole incidents. So actually, after that, Parshuram, he goes and then he starts attacking the Kshatriyas. And he kills the Kshatriyas once, twice, thrice. 21 times he kills the Kshatriyas. So now we might think that actually now Lord Parshuram's anger is disproportionate. It is unreasonable anger. Okay, somebody killed his father, killed that person, kill all the sons of Kartika Arjuna, but why kill all the Kshatriyas? So Bhagavatam describes actually that this there was a history of this Haiha dynasty performing atrocities against the other castes, other varnas. So this wasn't the first time. This was just the tipping point that had happened of killing of a sage. But these Kshatriyas have been performing a lot of atrocities against the different the other varnas. So for example, in the Vedic tradition, a Kshatriya king is supposed to protect 5 different categories of people. So they are supposed to protect cows, brahmanas, women, children, and the elderly people. So to do one's duty is one thing. That is their duty, to protect them. But to neglect that is itself a dereliction of duty and is culpable of being punished. But to do opposite of what is one's duty, that is is outrageous. So Kshatriya is supposed to protect the Brahmanas, but when the Kshatriya himself goes and kills a sage, that is completely outrageous. So for example, if you understand it from today's point of view, so this corona is spreading everywhere, and suppose there is a very serious patient in the hospital, and the nurse calls the doctor, and the doctor, this patient is very serious, he'll die, please come and save him. And the doctor would say, no, I am actually watching my favorite movie, I would not come now. So that is like a dereliction of duty. But if the doctor goes and gives poison to the patient, and kills him, that would be a far greater crime. So that's what these Kshatriyas have been doing. There was like a full background, full history of how these Hayya kings had been violating the rights of others, as we call it in today's language. So Parshuram thought that this killing of a sage was just a tipping point, but Parshuram thought that actually these Kshatriyas needed to be punished. They needed treatment that would require them to be separated from their bodies so that they can be purified, not in this life but in the next life. So he went ahead and he started killing everybody. So this battle also was largely fought in Kurukshetra. So Kshatriya Rudra Jale, it describes that he made a river of Kshatriya blood to flow. And the Kshatriyas were so terrified, it is described that they fled the Aryavarta. They just left India and then fled out. And once in 1971, Srila Prabhupada was giving a lecture, like a talk, and right in the middle of the talk, and he said, all of you, Westerners, these Western disciples, all of you are descendants of Kshatriyas who fled the Aryavarta in fear of in the fear of Parshuram. So it is Srila Prabhupada's mercy that the descendants of people who fled in the fear of Parshuram, they are now coming together and worshipping Lord Parshuram, Lord Krishna. So now later it is described that Parshuram actually performed a great yagya. He understood that as a Brahman he shouldn't have done that, but somebody has to do the needful. If Kshatriyas are themselves not upholding the law and order, somebody had to do it. So Lord's mood is whatever is necessary to protect law and order, he would do that. So although he was a Brahman himself, but he took up weapons like a Kshatriya, and then he ensured that the law and order is protected. But he was conscious that as a Brahman, that was not right on his part. So to atone, he performed a great yagya, and it is described Kashyap Muni was the chief priest in that yagya. And then at the time of yagya, charity has to be given. So now the Parshuram was the king of the whole world because he killed all the Kshatriyas. So he actually gave away all the earth that he had won in charity to others. So there are different personalities that are mentioned, to whom he gave charity. And then, so that people shouldn't think that, he did it for his own selfish interest, because he actually got no benefit out of it. So everything was given away, and he actually had no place even to live. So actually then he threw his Parshu in the water, and at time land came out. That was named as Mahindra Parvat. So now he resides in Mahindra. So Parshuram is one of the 7 Chiranjeevis, Hanuman, Vibhishan, Parshuram, Ashwathama, Kripacharya, all these are Chiranjeevis. So Parshuram, it is said that he is still living. So, and then through the credit of that yagya, he also revived his father Jamadagni. And Jamadagni actually later on went on to become one of the Saptarishis. And Bhagavatam describes that in the next Manvantara, Parshuram will become one of the Saptarishis. So that is the great potency of Lord Parshuram. So I know that we are out of time. It's almost 10 minutes over, but there are some prominent pastimes of Lord Parshuram from Ramayana and from Mahabharata. If everyone is okay, I can quickly talk about those pastimes.
I think before you talk about the pastimes, you should see if there's questions, answers.
Sure, yeah. Any comments or questions?
I have one question, Prabhu. This is Prakash.
Yes, go ahead, Prabhu.
So this, I didn't know that Ashwathama was also a Chiranjeevi and Kripacharya was also a Chiranjeevi. Ashwathama in the end performed the brutal and gruesome activity of killing all the Pandavaputras. Why did he become a Chiranjeevi?
No, so actually later on he got a curse from Krishna, right? That he will be wandering, and his the wound that is there, because the money was taken out from his forehead. The wound will be giving him a lot of pain, and then he won't be able to die also. He would be roaming around. So you can read in Mahabharata, it is mentioned there. So because of that curse also, he was like, it is said that he's still roaming around in the different forests. So
he's a Chiranjeevi, but living that cursed life.
Right. But later on he will be redeemed also. That is also mentioned that he will be redeemed, and he also gets one of the very significant positions. I will have to check what exactly will happen to him later on in the next Manvantara. So Chiranjeevi doesn't mean that they are immortal. There is nobody immortal in this world. Chiranjeevi means that they will live a very expanded lifetime. So I'll give you the exact definition of Chiranjeevi later from the scriptures. But it doesn't mean that they are eternal. So it's not eternal life. It's just that they have a very elaborate, much more than the regular people who live. So they would live beyond different manvantaras. Actually, that is what Chiranjeevi means. Long life, Chiranjeevi means. Yeah.
Thank you.
I have, I guess, 2 comments, but
Yes,
maybe
Prabhuji, please.
the first one might be a question. I believe, you can correct me, but I thought you said that Srila Vyasadeva was one of the Das avatars.
Yeah.
Because I don't think he's one of the Das avatars.
He's not in the song. He's not in the pictures.
Okay. Maybe I may have mistaken on that.
Okay, that's one correction then.
Thank you.
The other is, I just want to, you mentioned how you forgive, but you don't trust. I just want to tell one time in Mayapur, I think it was Mayapur, where they caught a thief and they brought him, they called the police, they brought him to Prabhupada, and the police came and this thief took shelter of Prabhupada. And the police were there to arrest him, but he said, no, he said, I can't have you arrest him because he's taken shelter of me. And the police said that he's just saying that just so he doesn't get arrested. He said, if he's taken shelter of me, I have to give him shelter. So he gave him shelter. But of course, he didn't trust him. So he had one devotee, he's moved into the ashram. So he has one devotee watching him. And then he put on his other clothes, I guess, and he was leaving. And then the devotee caught him and brought him to Prabhupada. They called the police again. And Prabhupada, told, that I trusted you. I didn't trust him. He didn't trust him, but he basically had him arrested at that time. But at first, he forgave him, but he didn't trust him. And it was, of course, most people wouldn't have trusted him. And it showed he couldn't be trusted. So then then the police came and arrested him at that time.
That's interesting, yeah.
So forgive, but don't trust. At least until a certain point, till they earn your trust. In other words, if that devotee stayed a devotee for years, Prabhupada would trust him, but we pretty much knew he couldn't be trusted.
Yeah, Prabhupada actually.
But he took shelter of Prabhupada, so Prabhupada had to give him shelter. That's his duty. Anyway, that's it.
Prabhupada also teaches with his own examples. He's himself an acharya. So yeah, I have heard this from you earlier also, Prabhuji, what you said about this Mayapur incident. I think you have mentioned once in one of your lectures also. It's very interesting. And one other time, Prabhupada actually also teaches us about forgiveness and the quality of tolerance. So once I've heard that Prabhupada was giving a lecture in, I believe it was in New York, if I'm not wrong. But right in the middle of the lecture, this one person, he just stood up and then he started saying all sorts of offensive things to Srila Prabhupada. And Srila Prabhupada was just silently listening. He didn't say anything. And all his disciples were sitting, were just waiting for a signal from Prabhupada so that they can drive this person away. But they never got that signal from Prabhupada. And this person spoke for a long time, all sorts of offensive things, and then he left. So after he left, Prabhupada actually asked, so the disciples actually asked Prabhupada, why did he do that? And then Prabhupada said, I don't know. So he said, if Krishna allowed it, then I must accept it. So actually we see in Bhagavad Gita in 13.23, it says, Upadrashta Anumantacha. Krishna is the overseer and permitter. So Prabhupada actually is teaching us that if Krishna has allowed it, then I must accept it. So it's very, the way he was tolerant. Of course, when someone directly blasphemed Prabhupada, he was tolerant. But if someone blasphemed Krishna or the mission of Lord Chaitanya. He was quite apprehensive about that. But yeah, there are so many different pastimes of Prabhupada where he also teaches from his own examples.
But I think the disciples should have done something.
Yeah.
If he was
Not wait for the signal.
one time at a Ratha Yatra, I was there in New York Ratha Yatra, and Prabhupada was there. Prabhupada was giving a talk on stage. And then some guy, you know, that fountain in Washington Square Park. So he was standing not on the middle of the fountain, but on the edge of the fountain, higher than everyone. And he starts yelling and blaspheming Srila Prabhupada. And, you know, I know I was thinking what to do. You know, Prabhupada's here, do I make a commotion? You know, I don't know. But one black devotee who was, I guess, kind of in the front, he just starts walking through the crowd. The crowd opened up, you know, and he's walking to this guy, this guy who's blaspheming, who's standing up on this thing. And when he gets there, he punches him in the face. and Prabhupada, I was very happy to see that. But Prabhupada, his lecture was short, and I was always thinking about, I wonder what Prabhupada thought. And then I read or heard someone speaking who, after the Ratha Yatra and talking to Prabhupada, and Prabhupada said to him, "Did you see the devotee who hit that man?" And Prabhupada was laughing about it. So that was nice. Prabhupada actually appreciated it. So you can learn from that.
Yeah.
Just attack.
Yeah, you won't wait for him to have to defend himself, which he won't.
I think Prabhupada also writes about this in the pastime of Lord Shiva, when he was offended by Daksha. I think one of the purports Prabhupada writes that Guru Aparadh should not be tolerated. So, right? He writes that in one of the purports.
There is a hand raise, I think. Prem Kishori Mataji.
Prem Kishori Mataji, you had a question or comment?
Thank you, Prabhu. It was a wonderful class. Prabhu, I wanted to ask, you mentioned about the king Kartik Arjuna. Is it like in Bhagavatam, or where is it written about?
Yeah, it's in the Bhagavatam, Mataji. It's you can read 9th canto, chapter 15 and 16. You can read that, yeah.
Okay. Thank you, Prabhuji.
Hare Krishna, Prabhu.
Yes, Prabhu.
Prabhu, among the different types of avatars and expansions that you mentioned, what qualifies one avatar to be part of the Dasavatar? I mean, how do we distinguish an avatar?
Actually, no. So the Dashavatar is a completely different concept that is mentioned in the Garuda Purana. So you can read that how it establishes. Basically, Garuda Purana describes that these are the very, very important incarnations of the Lord, which came to perform very significant tasks. So no other. So it's not that now if some other avatara fulfills certain criteria, he will become one of the Dashavatar. It's not like that. It is just like in a conceptual way. It is mentioned that because these 10 are the most important avatars. The Lord performed very important pastimes with these avatars. They have been that terminology have been used, Dashavatara, to talk about them.
Thank you, Prabhu. Prabhu, one other question. You talked about the Manvantaras. Can you just a little bit briefly describe, I mean, is it based on a time frame? How do we understand Manvantaras?
Yeah, Manvantaras are basically the lifetime of one Manu. So we know that in one day of Brahma, the cycle of this Kali Yuga, Satya Yuga, Treta Yuga, and Dwapar Yuga, it happens 1,000 times. Okay. So in one day of Brahma, there are 14 Manus who come. So roughly in one life, like one lifespan of one Manu, there are about 72 Chaturyuga cycles that are there. So like that, one Manvantar consists of about, not exactly, but approximately. So one Mantara could be one Manvantara could be longer than the other could be shorter, like that. But on an average, there are about 72 yugas. Yugas, by yuga, I mean the cycle of this 4 yugas. So there are this in one Manvantara there are 72 times the whole cycle repeats.
Thank you, Prabhu.
And Prabhu, Krishna comes every seventh Manvantara, right? That's
Yeah,
what
and the 7th Manvantara and the 28th Yuga of that Manvantara. So right now, the 28th Yuga is going on of the 7th Manvantara. So, and I have also read in some of the books that Chaitanya Mahaprabhu also comes once in a day of Brahma. So both Krishna and Chaitanya Mahaprabhu comes once in one day of Brahma. So that happens in the 7th Manvantara, 28th Yuga. And Lord Brahma's age is also mentioned. It is 51 years now. So it is today is his birthday actually, in a sense that for our lifetime, in one day of Brahma, 1000 times this is happening. So any day we can wake up and say happy birthday to Brahma. So it's the first day of the 51st year of Lord Brahma's lifetime.
Maybe we should sing him the happy birthday song.
You never take birth again?
Prabhu, I got a question. So you said Krishna and Chaitanya Mahaprabhu comes into every day of Brahma?
Once in a day of Brahma.
Once in a day of Brahma, right?
Yeah.
So is that activities remain the same? And why is this repetition of the same activities? Does that mean that people in that yuga, they just do it? Why this repetitive cycle?
No, actually, so even if we look at Bhagavatam is the scripture that is the most important scripture for us. It's not that what happens in one yuga compared to other yuga is exactly the same. It's not like that. We can see that actually the other avatars, like Varaha avatar, comes only in the first Manvantara. It doesn't come in the other. It comes in the first Manvantara, and then in the 6th Manvantara. In the first Manvantara, when Varaha comes, he is the Rakta Shvetvaraha, and in the 6th Manvantara, he is the Rakta. Like that, different avatars come in different Manvantaras. Lord Narasimhadev was not, I believe, not in this Manvantara. He was one of the prior Manvantara, 6th Manvantara, I believe. But it's not exactly the same. But there are certain pastimes of the Lord that happens in every Manvantara. Like it is mentioned by the Acharyas that Lord Ram comes in every yuga of the Manvantara. So, but again, it's not that exactly everything happens the way it happens. There are certain differences. Now, at a broader level, the theme remains the same, that in every yuga Ravana would come and abduct Sita and all that, but there would be some differences. So, and that is why we see that in the different scriptures, the pastimes are described in different ways. And the Acharyas explain that is because of Kalpa Bhed. Kalpa Bhed means the same pastimes have happened in the other kalpas also, and it is happening in this kalpa also. So in the other kalpas, when it happened a little differently, and in this kalpa, when it is happening a little differently. So it's not that everything happens exactly similar. There are differences, but more or less the theme remains the same, that the Satyuga people are very enlightened, and then slowly things start deteriorating. Then Kali Yuga comes. Kali Yuga, everyone is deteriorated, and then finally the Lord has to come and he has to wind up the whole system of this. So
generally, it's said that Lord appears based upon the time and circumstances of that place, right? So does that mean those times and circumstances repeat, right?
Yeah, so we know that in every yuga there will be some miscreants, and Lord says that the reason for his descent is to establish the moral principles, to glorify the bhaktas. That is the purpose of his coming. So that are so those things will remain the same. It's not that in the other yugas he will come for some other purpose. So the purpose will remain the same. He will come to destroy the miscreants, and he will come to give pleasure to his devotees. But in this yuga, there could be some other miscreants. In other yugas, the other miscreants would have been there. So like that.
Thank you.
So it is cyclic, but it's not that everything happens exactly in the same way.
So, Prabhuji, you are saying that the pastime is not same. That's what you are saying.
Yeah.
I mean, we see that Ramayana, right? We know the entire story, but Ram will come, but the pastime won't be same. That's what you're saying.
I mean, at a broader level, it will remain the same, that Ravana would come and abduct Sita and all that.
Okay.
But sometimes it is described that, so there are the 4 Chaturviha expansions are there, right? So sometimes Pradyumna would expand himself as Ram, sometimes Vasudev will expand himself as Ram. And then even if when he comes, the pastimes would be a little different. And I can give examples of how in the different scriptures the pastimes are described differently, but I just don't remember at the top of my head. I can just look it up and share the details, how they are described differently in different scriptures. And Acharyas explained that is because of Kalpabhed. The same pastimes were happening in the other Kalpas also, but they happened a little differently.
Okay.
So it's not that if the Lord has to come, he has to follow a particular script all the time. So it will be very boring for the Lord to do it, right? If everything has to happen the same way. Even in our
very good point, Prabhuji. It's very interesting. That's why Sesnag hears all the time from all 4 Kumaras. So they hear continuously because it's so interesting.
Right.
Like here, people are hearing after 9:30, around 9:30. It's 30 minutes more. So it's more interesting to hear.
Yep.
Yeah.
So for in our example also, when we go to our offices, we see that we have different days of the weekend. And at a largely, I would say all the Mondays for me are almost similar. I have the same meetings on every Monday, same repetitive meetings, but still my day is not exactly the same. There are certain things that go differently on each Monday. So similarly, in each Tuesday, it's not the same. Although I may have the same kind of meetings, but different things would be discussed in those meetings. Different events would happen on different Tuesdays. So it's not that there is a set script that has to be followed all the time. So okay, and if people still have some appetite, I can quickly talk about some pastimes from like one from Ramayana, one from Mahabharata. Caribou, should we discuss or should we wrap up here, because it's 9:30 now?
Well, I know I have to chant some rounds, but I think if people, they have time and they don't mind, they can stay in. But people can also get off if they have other things to do.
To jump to other call also, right?
Okay, then maybe we can stop here.
I mean, someone is saying, please discuss. I mean, you can if you want.
Okay, let me quickly, whoever wants to drop out, that's fine. I'll just quickly mention the pastimes then. So one from Ramayana, one from Mahabharata. So we see in the Ramayana, there are many instances where Parshuram comes, but the most prominently he comes at the time of the Swayamvar of Mother Sita. So when Lord Ram wins the hands of Mother Sita and then he's returning back to Ayodhya from Mithila, at that time, suddenly it is described that suddenly inauspicious signs start coming up. There is a wind starts blowing, and then Parshuram appears over there. So as soon as Parshuram comes, so as I was saying that Parshuram is infamous, at least among the Kshatriyas. And when Dashrath Maharaj sees Parshuram had come, he becomes frightened looking at Parshuram. So Parshuram had heard that someone broke the bow of Lord Shiva. Har Kodand Khandanaha. So Kodand is the bow, Hara is Lord Shiva. So Hari is Lord Vishnu, Hara is Lord Shiva. So Har Kodand Khandana. Khanda means broke the bow. So when Lord Ram broke the bow, so Lord Parshuram hears about it, and then he thinks that, oh, have the Kshatriyas become strong again? So he decides to come forward and check. So when he comes, immediately Mother Sita, she sees that Parshuram is coming. So she immediately goes forward and offer respect to Parshuram. And Parshuram says Sabhagyavati Bhava. Sabhagyavati Bhava means, roughly it means that may your husband live a long life, something like that. So and then Parshuram asks, who broke the bow? So either Lord Ram, he broke the bow. So then he says, I want to fight with you. But Mother Sita says, no, but he's my husband. So Parshuram thinks, I don't know, I just give a like a blessing to her. How can I fight with Lord Ram now? So he says that, okay, I can't fight with you. So he says, okay, you broke the bow of Lord Shiva. Here is another bow, which is more stronger. This is the bow of Lord Vishnu. Just pick this bow and, string this bow. And let's see if you can string it. So Lord Ram actually, he took the bow from Parshuram and then he just took it very casually and then stringed it, and then he took out an arrow and pointed it towards Parshuram. So Parshuram was stunned to see Lord's power, and further he was amazed to see that his power has disappeared. So at that time he understood that this is actually me only. So he actually, so this is the like two supreme personalities of Godhead meeting together. So there's a meeting of two incarnations of the Lord. So he tells to Lord Ram at that time that, okay, now that you have come to protect the world, let me depart and I'll retire now. So he goes away from there. So this is one of the prominent pastimes from Ramayana. Then in the Mahabharata, actually Parshuram comes several times. So we know that he's the teacher of Bhishma. He's also the teacher of Karna. So he curses Karna when he comes to know that Karna is just acting as a Brahman. He's not actually a Brahman. He's he's either a Kshatriya, like a lower caste Kshatriya. He actually curses Karna. But most importantly, the reference of Parshuram comes in the Bhishma Parva of Mahabharata. Just before the war is about to start, at that time, Duryodhana asks his commander to measure the strength of the armies. So at that time, Bhishma says that I alone can annihilate the whole Pandav army. Nobody would be able to stand in front of me. But he says that I won't fight against one warrior, and that is Shikhandi. So at that time, he starts telling the story about Shikhandi. So when he tells, so we all know about the story of Amba, Shikhandi, that how he was Amba in his past life. So Amba, Ambika and Ambalika were the three princes, and Bhishma wanted to get Vichitravira and Chitrangda married. So he goes, and then so there is this Swayamvar was arranged for Amba, Ambika and Ambalika. So Bhishma goes and then he defeats everyone, and then he gets these three princes. And then after reaching to Hastinapur, Amba actually says that no, I can't marry either of these two princes, because actually I wanted to marry Shalva. That is the other person. I loved Shalva and I wanted to marry him. So Bhishma actually says that you should have told me before. You can go back to him. I don't, it's okay. So when she goes back to Shalva, so Shalva says that no, another man has touched you. I can't marry you. So she comes back to Bhishma, and Bhishma says that no, I can't marry you because I have taken a vow to remain celibate throughout my life. So at that time, this Amba feels very pensive, so vindictive. So she goes and she performs austerities. So she goes to the forest, and that time in the forest, she also meets her own grandfather, who has become a Rajrishi. So he narrates his plight to the other sages who she meets in the forest. So in the forest, there is a disciple of Parshuram, Akritwan. So now when she besieges to her grandfather, so her grandfather actually requests Akritwan to do something. So Akritwan says that just tomorrow Parshuram is coming, and Parshuram is actually Bhishma's teacher, his martial teacher. So he will ensure that Bhishma does the needful. So next day when Parshuram comes, so Amba falls at his feet, and then she requests Parshuram to do something. So Parshuram is not ready to do anything. So at that time she goes to Akritwan and requests him. So Akritwan actually comes and besieges to Lord Parshuram. So Parshuram's principle is that if a Brahman asks me to do something, then I will oblige that request, and I will not say no to Brahmanas. So when Akritwan requests to Parshuram, Parshuram says that, okay, I have long ago renounced my weapons, but now I'll do the needful. So he actually at that time goes to Hastinapur. So in Hastinapur, so Parshuram is the teacher of Bhishma. So when he comes over there, Bhishma is very happy to receive him, and then he welcomes Parshuram, and then they both start talking. And then at that time, Parshuram tells Bhishma that you should actually marry this Amba. So Bhishma actually says at that time that no, I have taken a vow of remaining celibate throughout my life, so I cannot do it. So Prabhupada also write in one of the purports in the 4th canto, I believe, when Brahma instructs the 4 Kumaras to beget children and then great children and the great grandchildren and then great grandchildren, and Kumaras think that there is nothing great about it. So Parshuram writes, Lord Srila Prabhupada writes in the purport that this is one instruction that can be disobeyed. So so Parshuram tells Bhishma that either you marry her or you fight with me. So Bhishma says that okay, I'll fight with you. So now these fights that used to happen in those times, those are actually also like a celebration. So when the fight is to happen, they first decide on where will they fight, the place for the fight. So they decided it will be fought on Kurukshetra. So then it is described that the battle of Mahabharat, it took about 18 days for that battle to get over. But the battle between Bhishma and Parshuram, it lasted for 28 days. So on the first day when they were facing each other, Bhishma told Parshuram, you are a Brahmin, where is your armor? Where is your chariot? How can I fight with a person who doesn't even have an armor or a chariot? So at that time, Parshuram laughed. He said, the earth will be my chariot. The wind will be my charioteer, and the Vedas will be my horses. The mother of Vedas, Gayatri and Saraswati, will be my armor. Just fight. And then as soon as he said that, he started shooting arrows at Bhishma, and Bhishma was almost blinded with the arrows of Parshuram. And as he started countering the arrows, and then he started seeing what's happening. So then he saw that there's a big chariot, as big as a city that had appeared. So Parshuram had produced that with his own mystic power, and his disciple Akritwan had become the charioteer. So they were fighting, and then initially Parshuram, knocked down Bhishma. Then later on, Bhishma knocked down Parshuram. So all this was happening. On the 23rd day, it is described that Parshuram started fighting with redoubled vigor, and he shot an arrow which actually it pierced the armor of Bhishma, and then Bhishma was thrown off the chariot 50 yards away. And before that, Bhishma's charioteer had been killed, his horses has been killed, and Bhishma was lying in a swoon over there. So as he came back to his consciousness, he suddenly saw there are 8 divine beings, the Ashtavasus had appeared over there, and they told Bhishma that actually you are one amongst us, and just keep fighting, and then victory will be yours. So their battle continued, and then on the 27th day, Bhishma was thinking that actually there is no way I can defeat Parshuram. He's so powerful. So at that time, the Ashtavasus appeared again, and then they said that actually you in your past life you had a weapon, the Parishrava weapon, and now you have forgotten that weapon, but we will give you we'll remind you about that weapon, and you can use that weapon the next day. And when you use that weapon is not known even to Parshuram. So when you use that, because Parshuram is a Chiranjeevi, he cannot be killed, but he will be knocked down, and then you can use the Sambardhan weapon to bring him back to consciousness. In this way, your victory will be established. So on the 28th day, when the battle started between Parshuram and Bhishma, so slowly it appeared that Parshuram was getting an upper hand, and at that time, Bhishma took out this weapon, Parishrava weapon. So as soon as he took out, so actually, as I was saying, that even the fights were also an event for celebration. So this Parshuram was like a big spiritual master. He had thousands of disciples, and all his disciples had come to witness the fight between Bhishma and Parshuram, and all of them were cheering for Parshuram. And there were also demigods from the sky. They were also watching. The different demigods and sages had also come to see this fight. So as soon as Bhishma took out this weapon, the Parishrava weapon, so all the demigods started shouting that no, you can't use this weapon, this. So, but Bhishma paid no attention. He just went ahead, and at that time, Narad Muni comes over there. Now, Narad Muni is normally known to set fights, but actually here he stops the fight. Of course, Narad Muni does what is necessary for the service of the Lord. He neither sets fight nor stops fight. He does whatever is necessary for the service of the Lord. So he comes over there and then he tells Bhishma, no, you can't use this weapon. No, there's a Parshuram is a Brahman. He's an ascetic in the sense that there is no Lakshmi Devi. Parshuram never married. There is no Lakshmi Devi next to Parshuram. He had his own Parshu, and that's it. That is how he's worshipped. And moreover, he's your teacher. You cannot use such a weapon on him. So at that time, the Ashtavasus appeared again, and then they said, do what Narad Muni is telling you to do. So, and then on the other side, Parshuram saw that Bhishma has took out this Parishrava weapon, and he understood that I cannot counter this weapon. So he was not able to see this coming of Narad Muni and the Ashtavasus, because all that was happening at a mystical level. So Parshuram there said that, oh Bhishma, I am dead now, and then he kept aside his bow, and then he got down his chariot. So Bhishma also saw that Parshuram has suddenly stopped the fight, and then he also got down from the chariot, and then he offered his obeisances to Parshuram. So at that time, Parshuram turns to Amba and then tells her that I have done everything I could for you. I'm sorry, I can't do anything more for you. So at that time, Amba says, okay, and then she goes away. And then Bhishma and Parshuram, they embrace each other. And Parshuram tells Bhishma that, the whole Kshatriya clan couldn't fight against me. And you alone fought with me for so long. He says, you have done your preceptor proud with the excellence, with your excellence in your prowess. You are the greatest fighter and the warrior on the earth. There is no other warrior like you. So we see that actually Parshuram becomes the standard bearer of strength. And when the glories of Lord Ram and Bhishma is to be established, it is established by comparing it against the glories of Lord Parshuram, against the strength of Lord Parshuram. Of Lord Parshuram, if there are no comments, we can recite a quick prayer for Lord Parshuram and then we can stop. Are there any comments or questions?
You didn't finish the story about Amba. What happened after that? And why didn't Bhishma want to fight with what's the name, Sukuni or whatever it was?
Yeah, so Shikhandi, yeah. So actually Amba then she performed austerities and pleased Lord Shiva. And then when Lord Shiva appeared, she said that I want to become the cause of Bhishma's death. So then in the next birth, she comes as Shikhandi. So, and because Bhishma knew the history of Shikhandi, he considered Shikhandi as a woman. So actually, if we read Mahabharata, it is mentioned that Shikhandi actually was born as a woman only, Shikhandini. And later on, by the by blessings of some sages, he became a male. So not with blessings of sages, but by blessings of a yaksha, Yuna. The name of the yaksha was Yuna. So Yuna agreed to exchange their gender. So Yuna exchanges the his gender with Shikhandini. And later on, when the king of Yakshas, Kubera, when he comes to know about this, he was very angry on Yuna, and then he curses Yuna that now throughout your life you will remain a woman. So Shikhandi actually, from Shikhandini, she becomes Shikhandi. So from a female to male, it's like a transgender. So Bhishma knew about this history, and then he considered Shikhandi as Shikhandini, as a woman. So he said that I won't fight against a woman. And he also knew that Shikhandi was Amba in the past life. So to honor that curse of Lord Shiva also, he didn't want to fight with Shikhandi. And later we know that how Shikhandi becomes the cause of Arjuna and Shikhandi together fight with Bhishma, and then Bhishma was overpowered at that time. Pyare Prabhu, would you like to add something?
No, but that's what you were telling, and you kind of didn't finish. So now
because I was focusing only on Bhishma and fight between Bhishma and Parshuram.
Well, I just want to say that I couldn't resist listening, and I didn't jump. Okay.
Okay, so then we'll not hold you now. We'll just recite a quick prayer for Lord Parshuram. Let me share my screen. It's just one verse, not a lot, and then we can stop this. You can repeat after me. You all can come out of mute and repeat after me. I'm audible, right?
Yes,
Yes,
okay. अग्रतः चतुरो वेद
अग्रतः चतुरो वेद
पृष्ठतः सशरं धनु इदं ब्राह्मम् इदं क्षत्रम्
इदं ब्राह्मम् इदं क्षत्रम्
शापादपि शरादपि. So this is an approximate translation of this verse. Parshuram, who is well versed with the four Vedas and sports the bow and arrow upon his back, that is the one who has the radiance of both the Brahmin and the Kshatriya, will destroy evildoers either with a curse or with an arrow. Shapadapi, Sharadapi, either with a curse or an arrow. So he destroys Karna with his sharp, with his curse, and then for others he used arrows. So that is the meaning of this prayer. I think it comes from Mahabharata. So thank you everyone. Thanks for joining, and let's just offer our obeisances to Lord Parshuram. Parshuram Bhagwan ki jai. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Granth Raj Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai.